Have you ever wondered why Queen Boudica's revolt against the Romans was so violent? This query takes us back to a time when empires clashed, and the course of history was written in blood and fire. Today, we delve into the life of Queen Boudica, a figure of immense strength and resolve, who stood against the might of the Roman Empire. Boudica, or Boudica, as some sources name her, was the queen of the Iceni tribe, a Celtic tribe that resided in what is now known as East Anglia, in England. Her fiery spirit and indomitable will shine through the annals of history, even after almost 2 millennia. In the 1st century AD, during the height of the Roman Empire, the Iceni tribe had a complex relationship with their Roman overlords. Initially, they had managed to maintain a degree of autonomy, despite the growing Roman influence. This was mainly due to the diplomatic acumen of Boudica's husband, King Prasutagus. He had brokered a deal with the Romans, wherein the Iceni tribe would remain semi-independent, in exchange for their loyalty and a share of their wealth. However, the tides of fortune turned dramatically upon the death of King Prasutagus. His will, which left half of his kingdom to his daughters and the other half to the Roman emperor, was ignored by the Romans. They annexed the entire kingdom, disregarding the rights of Boudica and her daughters. This blatant disrespect of their customs and the cruel treatment inflicted upon her family were the sparks that ignited Boudica's fiery revolt. Boudica's story is not just about a queen's rebellion against an empire, it's about a woman, a mother, a leader, standing up against oppression and injustice, fighting to protect her people and her daughters' rights. It's about the indomitable spirit of resistance against overwhelming odds. As we embark on this journey through history, we'll uncover the reasons behind the ferocity of Boudica's revolt, the impact it had on the Roman Empire, and its lasting legacy. To understand the magnitude of her revolt, we need to go back to the beginning. The tension between Boudica's tribe, the Iceni, and the Romans was not an overnight development. This tension had been brewing for years, a concoction of resentment and defiance simmering in the heart of Britain. The Romans had invaded Britain in the year 54 BC under the leadership of Julius Caesar. However, the true Roman conquest of Britain didn't begin until AD 43, almost a century later during the reign of Emperor Claudius. The Romans, with their superior military strength and strategic acumen, gradually began to subjugate the tribes of Britain, imposing their laws, their taxes, and their way of life upon the indigenous people. The Iceni tribe, under the rule of King Prasutagus, had initially maintained a form of independence through a tenuous alliance with the Romans. But the Romans were not known for their leniency or respect for local customs and traditions. Their oppressive policies and blatant disregard for the Iceni's sovereignty began to stir the pot of discontent. Prasutagus's death marked a turning point in this uneasy relationship. The Romans, ignoring the traditional rights of the Iceni, decided to annex the kingdom outright. They went further, publicly humiliating Queen Boudica and subjecting her daughters to unspeakable atrocities. This was the spark that ignited the flame of rebellion. Boudica, a woman of immense courage and determination, refused to be a silent victim of Roman tyranny. She rallied her tribe and others who had suffered under Roman rule, their collective fury echoing through the rolling hills and ancient forests of Britain. Every act of Roman oppression, every insult, every injustice was a bellows to the flame, fueling a rebellion that would shake the very foundations of the Roman Empire in Britain. The stage was set, and Boudica was ready to fight. This was not just a struggle for power or territory, but a fight for dignity, for freedom, for the very soul of Britain. The brewing tension had reached its boiling point, and the time for words had passed. Now, it was time for action, for a revolt that would echo through the annals of history. In 60 AD, the spark of rebellion ignited into a full-blown revolt. The simmering resentment against the Romans was being stoked by a fierce and indomitable woman, Queen Boudica. She was a woman of grit, determination, and a burning desire for freedom, who managed to rally the tribes of Britannia under a unified banner. Her call to arms was not just a cry for revenge, but a desperate plea for liberation from the iron grip of the Romans. The tribes, weary of Roman oppression and exploitation, saw in Boudica a beacon of hope and resistance. They rallied around her, their spirits ignited by her fiery resolve and impassioned speeches. The initial stages of the revolt were marked by a series of victories that shook the Roman Empire to its core. Boudica, leading from the front, inspired her troops with her courage and military acumen. The Iceni, Trinovantes and other tribes struck hard and fast, catching the Roman forces off guard. The first blow came at Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester, a major Roman settlement. The Roman defenses crumbled under the onslaught of the enraged tribes. The city was razed, its proud structures reduced to rubble, its inhabitants met with a cruel fate. The victory at Camulodunum was a powerful statement of intent, a clear message to the Romans that the tribes were no longer willing to bear their yoke. Flushed with their initial success, Boudica and her warriors moved on to Londinium, the burgeoning Roman city that would one day become London. Here too, the Romans were taken by surprise. The city was laid waste, its population decimated, its wealth plundered. The tribes were not just winning, they were humiliating the mighty Roman Empire. These early victories served to further fuel the revolt, emboldening the tribes and deepening their resolve. Boudica, the fiery queen, was leading her people on a path of destruction and revenge. Her name struck fear in the hearts of the Romans, her victories serving as a testament to her prowess and determination. But Boudica wasn't just winning, she was decimating the Romans. Boudica's revolt was not just a military campaign, it was a violent and bloody retribution. And in this blood-soaked retribution, Queen Boudica's forces employed tactics of destruction that were brutal and ruthless. Imagine this. The once humming settlements of the Romans, now reduced to ashes. Boudica's forces left no stone unturned in their quest for vengeance. They razed Roman settlements to the ground, annihilating their architecture, their culture, their very essence. The streets that once echoed with the laughter of innocent children, the chatter of busy marketplaces, the clinking of Roman coins, all silenced. All that was left was the deafening silence of destruction, punctuated only by the crackling of burning embers and the occasional whimper of the dying. But the destruction of settlements was just one part of the picture. The real horrors lay in the treatment of the captives. Boudica's forces did not believe in the mercy of quick deaths. No, they relished in the slow, agonizing torture of their captives. The Romans, who once prided themselves as the conquerors, were now the conquered, subjected to the most inhumane treatments. Men, women, children, the elderly, no one was spared. Boudica's forces took a perverse pleasure in the torture of their captives, often making a public spectacle of it. The captives were subjected to unimaginable horrors. Some were flayed alive, their screams echoing through the deserted settlements. Others were impaled on stakes, their life slowly ebbing away in a cruel dance of death. And all this violence and bloodshed was not just for the sake of it. It was a message, a loud, clear, terrifying message to the Romans. And that message was this: you are not safe, you are not invincible, you are not the conquerors anymore, we are. Boudica was sending a clear message: no Roman was safe. And with this message, Boudica unleashed a fury that would be remembered for centuries to come, a fury that made the Romans question their might and their right to conquer. Despite the initial victories, Boudica's revolt was destined for a tragic end. The stage was set for the final confrontation between Boudica's forces and the mighty Roman army. The ferocity of Boudica's earlier attacks had taken the Romans by surprise, but they were now prepared and determined to quell the rebellion. At the heart of the Roman advantage was their superior strategy and discipline. Boudica's forces were largely untrained and relied on their sheer numbers and the ferocity of their attacks. But the Romans, under the command of Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, were seasoned soldiers, versed in the art of war. Paulinus chose his battleground with care. He selected a field with a narrow front, bordered by dense woodlands. This allowed his relatively small force to hold their ground against the more numerous Britons. The Britons, in their eagerness to engage the Romans, failed to take into account the disadvantage of their position. As the battle commenced, the Romans stayed in tight formation, their shields forming an impenetrable wall. The Britons, on the other hand, charged forward with wild abandon. Their initial onslaught was fierce, but it made little headway against the disciplined Roman ranks. The Romans then launched their counterattack. Their well-drilled soldiers advanced in unison, pushing the Britons back. The Britons found themselves trapped between the advancing Romans and the encircling wagons they had brought with them, which were intended for the spoils of victory. The result was a massacre. The Britons, including Boudica, were either killed in battle or took their own lives to avoid capture. The rebellion, which had started with such promise, ended in tragedy. Boudica's revolt ended in defeat, but her legacy lived on. Despite the loss, Boudica's name became synonymous with resistance against oppression. Her revolt, while ultimately unsuccessful, highlighted the indomitable spirit of the Britons, and has been remembered throughout history as an iconic stand against the Roman Empire. Boudica's revolt was more than just a historical event, it was a symbol of resistance. It was a testament to the indomitable spirit of a queen, a woman, and a people who refused to bow down under the weight of oppression. The shockwaves of this violent revolt rippled out far beyond the immediate aftermath, shaping the future course of Roman rule in Britain. It was a stark reminder to the Romans that their rule was not absolute, and that the spirit of resistance was alive and well in the hearts of those they sought to control. This event forced the Romans to reassess their approach to governance, to rethink their strategy. The Romans understood that to continue their rule, they had to tread more carefully, more respectfully. But the legacy of Boudica's revolt was not confined to the political and administrative corridors of Roman Britain. She became a beacon of hope, a symbol of resistance against oppression. Her story echoed through the centuries, inspiring future generations to stand up against injustice. She became a folk hero, her name synonymous with bravery, resilience, and a fiercely independent spirit. In the pages of history, Boudica's revolt was recorded as a defeat. Yet, in the annals of folklore and popular memory, it was anything but. Her revolt was not just a military campaign, it was a fight for dignity, for freedom, for the right to live on one's own terms. It was a message loud and clear that tyranny could be challenged, that oppressors could be defied. The legacy of Boudica's revolt is a testament to the power of the human spirit, to the resilience of a people pushed to the edge. It is a story of defiance and courage, of a queen who dared to stand up to an empire. The revolt may have ended, but the spirit of Boudica, the spirit of resistance, lived on. Even in defeat, Boudica's spirit remained unbroken. And that is the true legacy of the revolt, a legacy that continues to inspire and resonate even today. So, why was Boudica's revolt against the Romans so violent? The answer, as we've seen, lies in a complex tapestry of oppression, personal wrongs, and a desperate struggle for freedom. Let's take a moment to revisit these key points to better understand the magnitude of the revolt. Firstly, the oppressive Roman rule. The Romans were not benevolent conquerors. Their administration was marked by harsh taxation and exploitation of the local populace. The Iceni tribe, under Queen Boudica, was no exception. They suffered under the weight of these burdens, their liberty stifled, their resources drained. Then, there were the personal wrongs against Boudica and her daughters. The Romans' disrespect and violation of Boudica and her two daughters was a horrific act that stoked the flames of rebellion. This wasn't just a political revolt, it was a deeply personal battle for Boudica. She sought not just freedom for her people, but also justice for her family. The violent tactics employed during the revolt were a mirror to the brutality the Iceni had endured. Boudica's warriors razed Roman settlements to the ground, exacting a bloody revenge on their oppressors. This was not a revolt tempered by restraint, it was a full-scale onslaught fueled by years of resentment and anger. But what of the long-term impact of the revolt? Boudica's rebellion, though ultimately unsuccessful, left an indelible mark on the annals of history. It revealed the Romans' vulnerability, and served as a stark reminder that the oppressed will always yearn for freedom. It illustrated the lengths to which people will go when their backs are against the wall, when all they hold dear is threatened. In conclusion, Boudica's revolt was not just a violent outburst, but a calculated response to years of brutal oppression. It was a desperate fight for freedom, a cry for justice, and a testament to the human spirit's resilience in the face of adversity. Boudica's revolt was a violent response to brutal oppression, a desperate fight for freedom, and a lasting testament to the spirit of resistance.